safe disposal of residues. Our companies treat municipal waste and also industrial and commercial waste. They deal with non-hazardous waste as well as hazardous waste. Some have activities only in one member state, some in more than one. The burning issue of today is the following. We, the waste management, give a second life to resources. By doing so, we have to deal with all components and substances that were used at the manufacturing stage. Furthermore, most of the time, waste with valuable materials is thrown away by the consumers together with other waste. So, when recycling this heterogeneous waste, we have to produce a quality secondary raw material out of a resource which is very different from a virgin raw material. Currently, creating a functioning circular economy is a major challenge. Meeting this challenge requires producing quality recyclates, recovered material, that are reintroduced in a new economic cycle. Now, the European Union wants to meet a new, additional challenge, the zero pollution ambition. The goal of our event today is to better understand how the EU legislator will combine these two ambitions. To make a long story short, how can the circular economy, more recycling, and fighting pollution, re-injecting zero pollutants in the environment be combined? I'm not able to preempt our debates, but to set the scene, I wish to highlight several crucial questions. There is a need for consistency between recycling target and rules related to thresholds for chemical substances. Especially the recycling sector is in need of relevant rules related to waste. Most EU regulations are relating to products, for instance REACH, and were meant for them. For instance, chemical substances in recyclates should not be more stringent than chemical substances thresholds in products. Phase out substances of very high concern in manufacturing processes, eco-design, is a crucial step. But we also need to have the right rules for legacy substances which are and will still be in waste in the next years. And I would like to very briefly mention that some of the solutions for success rely on our sector. Developing selective collection, investing in sorting and depollution equipments, and working on closed loops with the manufacturing sector. Public support has also to play a role there. I'm thus very happy that we have the opportunity to discuss those important questions today with some representatives of the EU legislator, because we absolutely need three things: consistency between the two ambitions, feasible objectives for both ambitions, practical rules that are still missing. We will not enter, of course, into the details today. And we must not forget that circularity and depollution are also about economy, investments, competitiveness, European industrial leadership. A last remark before starting our conference. We support the circular economy approach, and we all know that not 100% of the material and energy content of products will get back into the circle. I feel a bit less comfortable with any approach based on a zero pollution objectives. Slogans are nice, making them 100% reality can be tricky and another challenge. Thanks, and now I pass over to Claire.
Thank you very, very much, Peter. And indeed, as we heard the waste management industry is facing a double challenge: meeting the requirements of a circular economy by producing quality recovered material, recyclates out of a resource which is not a virgin raw material, and now meeting the requirements of the recently launched Zero Pollution Action Plan. How can the industry meet both ambitions? How feasible are the objectives? And how compatible and consistent are the two ambitions? We're going to be hearing from representatives from the European Commission, the European Chemicals Agency, the European Parliament, as well as from the recycling industry. We'll also be taking questions, so do put them in the Q&A box on your screen. And of course, tweet using the hashtag delivering on circularity or the Twitter handle at FEAD info. And of course, our discussion is part of a partner event of EU Green Week. So do use hashtag EU Green Week. The Circular Economy and Zero Pollution Action Plans are part of the Commission's Green Deal to transform the EU's economy for a sustainable future. They involve a whole series of actions that will have an impact on the waste management industry. So it's my pleasure to introduce Luis Carretero Sanchez, Legal Officer at DG Environment's Sustainable Chemicals Unit, who'll give us an overview of the current state of play and plans for a revision of future EU regulation that impacts the industry. Luis, over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Claire, for introducing me, and thank you to the colleagues of FEAD for organizing this very nice event, which will deal with some of the issues that are at the highest political level at the moment. So I think it was a very good decision to choose this topic. Indeed, prepare a couple of slides just to set the scene very quickly. I'm not going too much into detail. I think we can go afterwards in the Q&A session. But it is important to have a bit of an overview of what is coming, which is quite a lot in the next years, both on the waste angle and also on the product legislation that will affect somehow waste. As Claire already mentioned, both the circular economy and the zero pollution ambition are part of the European Green Deal, and as such are very high in the political agenda. We have already adopted from the Commission side three documents, three communications that are covering most of the aspects of both circular economy and zero pollution. So in circular economy, we adopted last year, in March last year, the Circular Economy Action Plan, the second one, which is focusing a bit more on the product stage of materials and not so much on waste, although it also covers some reviews of waste legislation, as well as some issues that were dealt with also in the interface communication in 2018. And then in the second half of last year, we adopted the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability and a Toxic-Free Environment, which is the first deliverable of the zero pollution ambition, and which focus more on the production, use, and also disposal of chemicals. And very recently, we have adopted the Zero Pollution Action Plan for Soil, Air, and Water, which is focusing a bit more on the, let's say, release of pollutants into the environment and how we can avoid it and little by little transition towards this zero pollution ambition. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so here is a bit of an overview of the main actions that will be having an impact in the next years on waste management operations. I've been focusing a bit more on the legislative proposals that will come in the next years and that will be affecting your sector. On the product-related legislation, we have what is the flagship initiative of the Circular Economy Action Plan, that is the Eco-Design Directive, or the revision of the Eco-Design Directive. This revision will broaden the scope of the directive to cover non-energy related products, and will also include new sustainability aspects. So we will not be only focusing on energy efficiency, but also on durability, recyclability, and reduction or minimization of the presence of harmful chemicals, and in particular substances of concern. So this will have a clear impact on what comes to the waste stage in the next years, from here in 10 years, let's say. While the Green Claims Initiative, that is also part of the Sustainable Products Framework, will make sure that what companies say they have in their products is exactly that and not something else. So there is no greenwashing in their activities. And then we have the revision of the chemical legislation that will also be coming as of next year for REACH and CLP, and also in the following years for other species such as cosmetic or toys. And this will also have quite a lot of impact in the waste sector. On one hand, because there will be more stringent measures for some harmful chemicals, what we call the most harmful chemicals, as well as the substances of concern. And on the other hand, because waste is very much linked to the classification of chemicals under CLP. So depending on the new hazard classes that will be added, there will also be consequences in the waste stage. And then what I think is probably more interesting for you is the revision of the waste legislation that has been announced both in the Circular Economy Action Plan and in the Zero Pollution Action Plan. Here we already have the batteries regulation that has been adopted and is now in interinstitutional discussions. But we also have a series of directives that are going to be amended in the next 2 to 3 years, including the main pieces of waste legislation, as it is the Waste Framework Directive, the packaging and packaging waste, and then other directives that are more connected to chemicals policy as well, like DROS, WEEE, and end-of-life vehicles. There are also other directives that will be amended, such as the waste oils, urban wastewater, sludge, and the waste annexes of the pulp regulation. And all these, or the commitment by the Commission, is that all these revisions will be, or the proposals for revision by the Commission will be adopted before the end of the mandate. And then I also wanted to mention something that sometimes is not brought up in these discussions, and is the non-legislative actions or the funding instruments that we are using under the chemical strategy and the Circular Economy Action Plan to help with the contamination, let's say, and sorting of harmful substances in waste. We have already included in the new Horizon Europe program dedicated line of financing for innovative technologies that help in this regard. And together with this, we also have some pilot projects on chemical recycling that can help as well with the recycling of certain harmful chemicals. But here, as I added to the slide, we are aware that there are many technologies, and we also want to make sure that we are only supporting those that have an overall positive environmental and climate performance. So this means that there will be some of these technologies that might be good from a decontamination point of view, but maybe not so good from other environmental or sustainability aspects, and then will not be supported. And finally, there will be also some studies and work from the Commission in the as regards tracking of chemicals and the presence of chemicals in articles, in products, and to the waste stage, that built also on the work that ECA is doing on SCIP, and that Lorenzo will present afterwards. So I think there is a lot of work ahead, and surely we can discuss now a bit more in detail on those directives or pieces of legislation you are more interested in. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Luis. Yes, there's a whole stream, literally, of regulation that's in the pipeline. I was just noting down your mention of the reduction of substances of concern, and I'm wondering if you can elaborate how important is it to actually start to phase those out in products as a first step towards zero pollution?
Yes, of course. In the chemical strategy and in the Circular Economy Action Plan, we already referred to the need to transition towards what we call non-toxic material cycles. This is an ideal situation where we will not have any harmful substance present in waste. So this waste can be safely recycled without having any risk for human health or the environment. And we committed to take a series of actions at the waste stage, but also at what we call the design stage of products. And here is where this phasing out of some toxic substances, not necessarily all substances of concern, but at least what we call most harmful substances in consumer and professional products will take place. And why is it important? The main idea is that we know that the waste management operators are putting a lot of money, a lot of resources into sorting and decontamination for these harmful chemicals. But this will never be enough if we continue discarding products that contain new chemicals that are as well harmful and that will be in 5-10 years restricted in chemicals legislation. So what we have to ensure is that products are chemically safe by using safe and sustainable by design chemicals, and that can at the same time be recycled. How can we do this? Well, in the Commission, we are first developing some kind of safe and sustainable by design criteria for chemicals. So these are the chemicals that we will be promoting and which use will be, let's say, supported by the Commission. But at the same time, we are, in the context of the Eco-Design Directive, in the context of the new revision of REACH, we will extend the restrictions or the regulatory approach to other chemicals. And at the same time, for those chemicals that we don't want to restrict because they are essential or because they are not as harmful as others that are a priority for us, then we want to improve what we call the chemical information or the information on the chemical content of the products. And this is what links both to the SCIP database, but also to the Eco-Design Directive, where there will be a new development called the Digital Product Passport, which will include different information on the products, including chemical safety, but also, for example, durability, dismantling instructions, and so on, that will be helpful also for the waste phase of those products.
Understood, and we'll talk more about the SCIP database. We'll be hearing from the European Chemicals Agency and also the industry's view on that SCIP database that you've been mentioning. One quick question for you, Luis. How are you going to tackle this interface? You've got product regulations and you've got waste-related rules. So how can you ensure consistency? I think this was raised by Peter in his opening remarks, but also ensure that the waste management rules are adequate.
Yeah, well, this is an issue that has already been discussed for quite a long time in the Commission and with stakeholders. I mean, in 2018, we already adopted a communication on what we call the interface between chemicals, waste, and product legislation. And there we identified a series of issues that were hampering both recycling, but also compliance with product legislation. The commitment from the Commission is to tackle all these issues. So be this information on chemical content, end of waste criteria, waste classification, presence of substances of concern, ensuring a level playing field for EU produced and imported products. All these issues that have been already identified are to be tackled through the different initiatives. So we have actions upstream, as I said already, on the eco-design, on REACH, that will cover information, that will reduce the presence of these harmful chemicals. Then we also have actions at the waste stage, where we will be supporting the decontamination. We have actions on waste classification that will be, let's say, a combination of both the review of CLP and the review of the Waste Framework Directive in this moment. And the Commission is also committed now to kind of map those waste streams where end of waste criteria or harmonized end of waste criteria is needed. So our hope is that with all these actions that are linking the main priorities within the European Green Deal and that will take place during this mandate, the situation will improve quite a lot. But of course, I mean, there will be some situations where we will still have to find a balance in the next years because of the issue that will be also tackled later in this event of legacy substances. I mean, we will have some waste streams that will be contaminated for many years to come, and there is where we need both innovative technologies, but also to ensure that what is recycled is chemically safe and doesn't affect human health or the environment.
Understood, Luis. And very quickly, I think you mentioned a digital passport in your remarks for products. How's that going to help the zero pollution ambition? And how would it work? Would there be a QR code or something else?
Well, the short answer is we are still discussing it, so we cannot really commit to say what is the physical shape that it will have. But the idea is that this digital product passport, in the context of the Sustainable Products Initiative, will gather all sustainability and safety information of the product. So you will have from instructions of use of the product to also dismantling instructions, what in the chemical legislation we consider as safe use instructions, so how to handle it when you are producing other products using some materials and so on. You will also be able to bring information from existing databases, for example, from SCIP. It could be a possibility to have the information in the physical tag of the product. And all these will have positive consequences when it comes to, for example, waste management, because the problem now is that we might have an idea of what is in the products or in the product category, but of course we don't identify exactly the content, the chemical content with the concrete product. If you have an identification, it will be easier. But on top of this, it will also have other information, for example, on environmental footprint and so on, that will help consumers to have some kind of knowledge of what will be better from a sustainability point of view to purchase.
Luis, thank you for giving us an overview of all of those regulations that are in the pipeline. And I'd also like to ask the audience, if you want to know specifically about some of those regulations that are coming up, please do put questions in the Q&A. Now, we've been mentioning the SCIP database, and if the waste management industry is to contribute to the zero pollution ambition, it needs to know which substances and chemicals are in the waste it recycles. And the industry welcomed the launch, I think it was in January, of the database, and it aims to make available information on substances of concern in articles or products to waste operators as well as to consumers. Lorenzo Marotti is from the Exposure and Supply Chain Unit from the European Chemicals Agency, and he's going to tell us more about the database and how he sees it as a valuable tool for the waste management industry. So, Lorenzo, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, and hello everybody. First off, I wanted to thank you for allowing me to speak here at this event today. And yes, my name is Lorenzo Marotti and I work at the European Chemicals Agency. And I'll try to speak a bit today about the SCIP database and how this could be the first step towards more clean cycles. But first, maybe a few words about the agency itself. So the European Chemicals Agency is based in Helsinki in Finland. And the agency implements the EU chemicals legislation, and essentially we implement REACH regulation, CLP, biocide, PIC, POPs, and others, and also the Waste Framework Directive. So on the next slide, maybe we can dive into the SCIP database, so about what it is and its objectives. So it's the database for information on substances of concern in article or in products. And indeed, it is established under the Waste Framework Directive. And the general aim of the database is to increase the knowledge base of hazardous chemicals in article and products throughout their whole life cycle. So this is relevant because at a certain point, article and products will become waste. So until the waste stage. And the general objective is, of course, to communicate this information, and by doing so, and by having this repository of information of substances of very high concern, to encourage substitution with substances that are safer alternatives, to track and reduce hazardous substances and waste, and ultimately indirectly contribute to clean cycles, to a clean circular economy, which is done by ensuring essentially that hazardous substances are not present in recycled materials or in within these thresholds. And how it's done: essentially, there is a SCIP obligation on companies who supply articles containing substances of very high concern in a concentration above the 0.1% in weight in products and article on the EU market. And these companies, they have to submit information about this article to ECHA in the database. On the next slide, we can see a bit about the target audience of the SCIP database. So this information will for sure help authorities in monitoring SVHCs in article and materials, will help enforcement and support the policy making. And still on the same slide, also consumer will be able to, as we were saying before, make informed choice. So when having this information will allow them to see what is best to purchase in regards to at least chemical risk, and how to use and dispose the article and the products that they purchase. And most importantly, for waste operators, it will support the waste management practices, for instance, segregation of certain articles or certain materials in the waste stream. We hope it will foster innovation, and that eventually it will contribute to have an increased output, especially in terms of the quality of the recyclate. And yes, it is important to note that there are no duties on waste operators for this SCIP database. Essentially, the SCIP makes additional data available to waste operators, hopefully to support their operations. And here there are some examples. So what I was touching a bit before on segregation, waste containing candidate substances, the identification of material-based stream that could be indeed impacted if those substances were present, and fostering innovation and possibly the emergence of new technology for waste treatment. And now, just very quickly, I just wanted to say that we are working on the dissemination of this data, and here very quickly on those slides I can already show you how we envision this. So on the ECHA website we will have a dedicated portal, a dissemination portal, where we will be able to look for articles, and on the next slide we see that then we will have all the information on this article and products. We will be able to access to a fact sheet, and on the fact sheet we will have all the details relative to the identifiers, to safe use instructions, and all the information that the duty holders will be filling in their notification. And we will also have the let's say the composition, the tree of the product, so all its components and which components contains what. So I think this is important information that could be relevant for certain waste operators. And moving on, we will also have information on the candidate list on the substance of very high concern that is contained in the article, with some information about the location, the material category, the mixture category, and the concentration range. Yes, and in conclusion, just to say that we are working on this, and we also envision possibly an API system where this information could be retrieved possibly in bulk to be optimized in the operations of waste operators. And this is going to be dependent on the resource availability in the coming years. So that's it from my side.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Thank you. I'm just wondering how many companies are using the database at the moment, and how many do you need for the database to be effective?
Well, there is not a target as such, but we have received something around little less than 10 million notifications at the moment. And we have something like 4,000 companies already contributing to this from a wide variety of sectors. So the information is coming. We still think it's still too little, so it is very important that the compliance rate will go up, and we are confident that this will come later on as member states start to implement and enforce this obligation.
In your opening remarks, you mentioned REACH, and I know one of the issues with REACH was that the industry either couldn't or didn't provide all the information needed, or they didn't regularly update the information. So I'm wondering what lessons you've learnt from REACH when creating this database.
Sure. Well, I think this is also a good occasion for me to say that the quality of the information that will be submitted in the database and then that will be disseminated is entirely a responsibility of the industry, of the duty holders. And on our side, we have designed and developed a flexible format that builds on the Euclid format, that is the same format for the registration on the REACH. And on top of that, we have tried to include enhanced functionalities and options for duty holders to submit in a streamlined way. In addition, we are very much focused on engaging with the duty holders. We have had other groups, webinars, continuing establishing contact and dialogue with the industry, and a variety of sectors, essentially trying to understand their doubt, their worry, and helping them to comply.
Well, we're going to hear from the industry in a moment from Claudia Menzi, who I'll introduce later on, who will give her view on the SCIP database, and it would be good to get your response later to that, Lorenzo. What I'd now like to bring into the conversation, because we've heard from the Commission, we've heard from the European Chemicals Agency, now let's hear from the advisor to the group of the Greens in the European Parliament, Axel Sinhofen. Axel, I know that the European Parliament has been very busy with lots of different resolutions being adopted towards the zero pollution and circular economy ambitions relating to waste management. Could you update us on some of the key ones?
Yes, good afternoon, Claire. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to participate in this event because indeed both circular economy which is kind of the new fashionable, more fashionable word for waste, and zero pollution, which is more fashionable for chemicals, are really finally are coming together. I'm working in that area for 25 years, and I'm really excited to see that the things come together, because circular economy alone is not sufficient. It's we need to have a non-toxic circular economy, so we need to add the qualitative, the pollution aspects into it. And even then, I would say it's not enough, because we still need to also put the resource angle into it, and to the reduction of the overall consumption of resources, if we really want to have sustainable non-toxic circular economy. Yes, the Parliament has a clear track record on this over many years. We adopted a resolution on resource efficiency in 2015, then one on the interface in 2018, and then we reacted to the chemical strategy last year, to the new circular economy action plan this year, and we actually provided 3 specific resolutions as an input to the zero pollution action plan. If I try to summarize the, let's say, 3 key messages that you see in all of those resolutions with regard to the issue that we discussed today, then number 1 is prevention. Prevention, prevention, prevention. We make very clear demands, and when I say that, I mean, I'm working for the Greens as an advisor, but here I'm really referring to the resolutions of the Parliament. It's the prevention of hazardous chemicals, so to enter material cycles. That's what we need, and that's why Parliament has been calling to step up regulatory activities, to substitute substances of very high concern. And that, of course, is also in more detail elaborated in the Parliament's resolution with regard to the chemical strategy, where we really stress this angle very, very strongly. Well, yes, unfortunately, not all of the substances that should have been banned many years ago have been banned. And even if they have, they may still be there and in products, and we need to track them. So the second part is really the tracking of those substances of concern throughout the supply chain, all the way to the recycle. When we adopted REACH more than 15 years ago, unfortunately, the information stopped at the supply chain, and then there was a possibility for consumers to get information, but there was no real information foreseen for waste operators. And we remedied that when we were revising the Waste Framework Directive, and in which context we indeed put an obligation on ECHA, to which ECHA was of course happy to deliver, is to develop the SCIP database. And then the third angle is decontamination. I mean, if we want to have non-toxic material cycles, as it's already set out in the 7th Environment Action Programme, which is now almost 10 years old, well, then first of all, of course, the first thing is we should not perpetuate the use of legacy substances. I mean, if we've gotten rid of something, then we should get rid of it for good and not try to put it back into the system via recycling. That's why Kurt was before saying he doesn't want to have stricter requirements for recyclates as compared to new. I fully agree. I think the risk is the opposite, that now in the name of recycling, people think they can have lower standards for recyclates as compared to the new products. And that, I think, would be killing the image of recycled. It creates a dual market, and that's not good. So that's why Parliament has been asking very clearly for the same standards from new as compared to recycled, products made from new as compared to recycled materials. And we only want to see really recycling of hazardous waste when there is when you need to do that, because there is no alternative for that material. And we want then, of course, that the recyclates are decontaminated during the process. Those are, let's say, the general blinds. But then, just to refer quickly to it, we've taken quite some pains at making sure that we mean it, and that's why the Parliament has objected to an authorization of DEHP for the recycling of soft PVC, and it has objected to the restriction for lead in PVC, not because it was in favor, it was against the restriction, not at all, but because it was against a derogation for recycling. So I think there's a clear track record on prevention, tracking, and decontamination in that context.
And you mentioned the SCIP database there as part of the waste directive. You know, how do you view it? Having listened to Lorenzo, what do you think could be done to improve it further?
Well, I think it's a very important tool for the prevention and, of course, and the detoxification of material cycles. I mean, to be honest, I'm biased, right? I was the legislator. I put it. I was part of those putting it there into the rule book. From what I have seen, I think ECHA has done a very good job in implementing it, against a huge protest from the industry that wanted to kill it outright. The Commission also made a good effort in securing the budget, because it was only added late in the process, and so there were some budget problems internally. But, well, the main deficiency I see is that it is only limited to the substances of very high concern that are on the candidate list. And that, of course, in a way is an aberration, because it doesn't matter whether you're on the candidate list or not. You have these properties as the substance, and therefore all substances of very high concern that meet the criteria under REACH should, of course, be subject to the SCIP database.
Thank you very, very much, Axel. Let me bring back Peter Kurt into the discussion, because you were referring to his opening remarks there, Axel. And Peter, to ask you for your response, what you've just heard from Axel, but also if you have anything to add from what you've heard from Lewis and Lorenzo.
Thanks, Claire. I would like to start with a short remark about the waste situation we have today. Look, you collect 20 tons of commercial waste, of household waste, and then you have those waste together, not able to identify similar products. Also, you have the waste, and our common goal is not only to treat this waste in a proper way, but also to bring as much as possible resources back in the production. This is circular economy. This is the difference between circular economy and waste management. We are not only talking about waste, we have to finish the waste status. We have to bring the material back to the product status. And therefore, we need a lot of support, our companies, a lot of support. We need a better separate collection, EU-wide. The wrong collection makes recycling very difficult. We need, of course, to phase out all dangerous materials in the products which survive when they are waste and come back as products. We need another innovation strategy, and that means that we definitely should open the EU funds for innovation also for the waste management and recycling sector. We are talking about the raw material industry of tomorrow. And this industry should be able to deliver the products, the material for the production. That means altogether, we need an innovation strategy and philosophy. We need to open the funds. We need a better separate collection. We need more information. We need to phase out materials of very high concern. And we need a clear eco-design philosophy, which also thinks about minimal content and things like this. This is all together. We need the whole circle working together. Not only, I repeat myself, to treat the waste, but to be able to deliver raw materials for the industry.
Thank you very, very much, Peter. Let me ask whether Luis, Axel, or Lorenzo, whether you would like to pick up on anything that Peter has said. Otherwise, we're getting a lot of questions from the audience, which is always great, and we'll go to audience questions. So let me just hand back to either Luis, Axel, or Lorenzo, the first person to open their mouth to respond to what Peter said. Otherwise, I'll go to the audience. There we are. Silence is golden. I will take a question then, which I think, Luis, is for you. And it says, will there be restrictions on certain chemicals, i.e. substances of very high concern, in the Eco-Design Directive?
Well, the current Eco-Design Directive already has some restrictions on chemicals for some flame retardants. But I cannot say at this stage what will be in the next Eco-Design Directive. Now we are performing the impact assessment, so it will be ready by the end of the summer, and it will not be until at least December of this year when we will have the proposal. So at this stage, I'm afraid I cannot say too much more.
Yes, of course, we're all wanting to preempt and see what these directives will look like. And there's another question here, Luis, for you, which is how will imports of products be dealt with in respect to their content of harmful substances? Will the new safe and sustainable by design criteria also apply to imported products/articles?
Yeah, the issue of imported products was already covered also in the interface communication. We saw there that indeed we have a problem also that is somehow derived of the lack of information on the chemical content of products. So I think safe and sustainable by design is part of the solution indeed, and will apply in principle to all those products that are placed on the European market. But what is more important at this stage is to ensure that we have information on what is in the products also when they come from outside the European Union, and not only when they are produced here. So I will change a bit the question and go a bit more for the information requirements and not so much for how safe and sustainable that is still under development will be applied in the future.
There's a general question for all of you, perhaps if I start with Axel here, which says, what role do you see for innovation? There's an actual specific question also. Is pyrolysis one of the chemical recycling technology that the European Commission will support? That might be something for Luis. But generally, what role do you see for innovation, Axel, in this sector?
Well, I would say the main role for innovation I would see indeed in the waste management sector. I think the upstream, which Peter also referred to, the phase out of dangerous substances, that doesn't really need innovation because, of course, it's also about producing alternatives, but those are very often already available. It's more an issue of the political will to ban things, which unfortunately is often a long process. But I think especially now the recycling should, to the extent possible, act like a kidney, so that you decontaminate the recyclates during the process where that is possible. I mean, when you speak about, for example, waste oils, actually, which are the biggest liquid hazardous waste stream, actually the proper terminology there is not recycling, but regeneration, because then you are actually getting rid of the hazardous substances they're in, and then you put proper oil again on the market. If you recycle it, then you are putting the dirty oil into new products. That's what we don't want to see, right? So that's why I think now there's always the dichotomy between mechanical recycling on the one hand and chemical recycling. But there are also something which is, let's say, in between, or solvent-based recycling. So where you can indeed dissolve the pollutants during the recycling process. And then, so it's actually like mechanical recycling, you don't have to go back to the molecules and so on as you do in the chemical recycling, and it's also with a lot less energy use. So I think there are. I was just made aware of a big program where extended polystyrene, which is contaminated, of course, from the old days with brominated flame retardants. This can be treated and can be dissolved and then be properly recycled, and the POPs are taken out of the system. So that, I think, is really an area where we need to see hopefully a lot more innovation.
Thank you. Peter, you'd like to come in?
Yes, directly, because today FEAD in Germany started to present 20 innovation of our members, sometimes worldwide innovations. So there are enough activities, but keep in mind, the recycling of plastic today is 50% more expensive than the virgin material oil. If you avoid minimal recycling contents for plastic products, you will hardly find a market for your recyclates, even if they will be more expensive in the future. First point. Second point. Also, Louise mentioned about the non-legislative action like chemical recycling. I discuss a lot about this thing. Please keep the eco balance in mind here. We need a lot of energy. We need a lot of energy for this treatment. And I think we should use more power and more thoughts about improving mechanical recycling instead of going to perhaps only so-called alternatives, which can't be a solution for the challenges of plastic recycling today.
Thank you, Peter. Louis, perhaps this is a question for you. Is pyrolysis one of the chemical recycling technologies that the European Commission will support?
Well, normally when the European Commission supports research, it's research of new technologies, not technologies that are already implemented. So what we have under the New Horizon program is a more general program on sorting and decontamination technologies. And within those decontamination technologies, we can also cover chemical recycling. But that does not mean that we are supporting a concrete technology over other one. That's not so much for us to do through our research programs.
Louis, also, there's a lot of interest in this eco-design directive. When will it be available and put into practice?
Yeah, I think that one I answered on the chat. We will, I mean, the Commission committed in the Circular Economy Action Plan to adopt it by the end of this year. But of course, this is a legislative instrument, so it has to go through the ordinary legislative procedure. It has to go to the Parliament and the Council, and then discussions will follow. So we don't know until there is an agreement between the co-legislators. We cannot say when it will be enforced.
Axel, as the co-legislator, any thoughts about the eco-design directive? What would you like to see in it?
Well, indeed, we of course want to have a clearly ambitious one. I think the Commission is, from what I see, with regard to its level of ambition, on track. I hope they will deliver according to the expectations that they have created. Well, there are many parameters that can or could be considered. Obviously, hazardous substances are a key one in there, but it goes well beyond that in terms of safe and sustainable design. So like environmental footprint was already raised and so forth. I mean, the Parliament did not go into any details for the time being, but just refer to the generic categories of criteria that we want to see. Also, a lot of that is already laid down in the Waste Framework Directive. So it's all about making it happen now. The question I would really have is to which extent it works to expand the existing one, which is on energy using products, where the focus is really during the use phase on the energy consumption, to something which is broader and then the problems are more upstream or downstream. So in a way, I would almost think it's better to have two separate instruments, and rather than maybe overloading the eco-design directive. But I don't know whether Luis has an answer to that.
Luis, do you want to unmute yourself?
Sorry, I was saying I'm afraid I don't have it, at least at this stage. I mean, it will depend on the options in the impact assessment as well. So.
Luis, there's another question here, which is, are we going to be treating all critical raw materials similarly, or will we be tiering the measures according to criticality? For example, elements involved in electric vehicles and electrification.
Well, I don't know exactly to what piece of legislation, to which piece of legislation they're referring, but if in the chemical strategy, we have now also inserting a new terminology or a new notion that is essentiality. So this will also be affecting the way we regulate chemicals in the future, and in particular, what we call the most harmful chemicals, which will be banned on consumer and professional products if they are not essential for society. So we are now developing this criteria for essentiality that will be also discussed, of course, with stakeholders and so on. But at this stage, it's a bit early still to discuss it more in detail beyond what I already said.
Okay. Another that question was from Andrew Hanratty in the Q&A. So if you want any more to give any more specifics, Andrew, please do, and I'm sure that Luis will reply in the chat. There's a question here, Axel, that you most probably can also see in the chat, which says the assumption of easily finding alternative is severely simplified. Only the number of accepted and needed exemptions under ROHS is speaking the opposite. In not few cases, silver substitutes may not even be available. Can you speak to that question, Axel?
Well, my perception is very much the opposite in the way the Commission, and I'm of course not not meaning anyone personally, is implementing or is dealing with substitutes. In the context of ROS, because this was referred to, there is the issue of the use of mercury in fluorescent light bulbs. It's long known that you have alternatives by the very same companies on the market, only that the old products are their cash engines, as they say themselves in the annual report. So they have no interest to shift to the new products. And that took, I think, now almost years before the Commission to finally pick this low-hanging fruit and to withdraw an exemption. Well, it's not even, it's in, from what I understand, into service consultation yet. But so there was a massive case also of the socioeconomic benefits to finally no longer allow these products on the market because of, well, there's the LED revolution has taken place in the meantime, and this needs to be rewarded. But unfortunately, the Commission in its current practice, and that's why it's so interesting to see all the commitments that they have, but its current practice is really lagging behind. It's almost rewarding laggards. We have the same situation with regard to chromium-6, which is used as for functional chrome plating, where we as Parliament have actually taken the Commission to court now because we think the Commission has not has granted an authorization for an application which is not in conformity, where the basic data are missing, to the extent that you cannot assess whether alternatives are properly available or not. You cannot assess whether the criteria for granting an authorization or not under REACH are fulfilled. And that really sends the wrong signal to those who have the alternatives available. So I think my first plea would be there, please, Commission, act, apply the law, nothing more than that, but apply it properly and apply it swiftly and not drag out forever. Then I think this would be a great help for all those that are offering the alternatives if they had the necessary legal certainty, that they would also get rewarded for it.
Luis, would you like to respond to what Axel has just said?
Well, I'm not working on authorization, so I don't know the details exactly of the issue, but I'm sure I can only defend the position of the Commission, of course.
Okay. One more question before we go to more industry representatives. Peter, this is for you. How do you see the possibility of using extended producers' responsibility schemes and fee modulation in these schemes to discourage the use of harmful chemicals by producers and put more costs on those creating the problem?
Thanks. We support the extended producer responsibility, and we support also the financial consequences for this. I think this is namely for household waste, because here the system is a little bit more complex than at the industrial side, in the industrial and commercial side. But it's the right way to ask for the responsibility of the production side. To close the loop means to bring them in the responsibility. And I think it's quite clear after our short discussion that we have two goals, which both are supportive, but which are not 100% free from being a little bit contradictory. And we have to see the reality of the waste management situation now, trying to deliver more and better raw materials for the production side. And some expectations, I feel, are not 100% realistic. We have to face the situation also like it is, and we should not try to reach zero pollution when also the nature, the materials never have been free from each little part of pollution.
I can see that there's a very good conversation going on in the Q&A between our speakers and the audience. So please do keep that conversation going. And there's a question there for the European Chemicals Agency about whether you actually know whether the database is actually being used by waste management companies. And I will come to you, Lorenzo, but that gives me a very nice link into the next speaker from the industry. Let me bring into the conversation Claudia Menzi, a laboratory manager for the industrial division of AZA Ambiente, an Italian market leader in waste management and recovery and a FEAD member. And she's going to give her company's view on the SCIP database. So Claudia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity today to exchange our experience and our thoughts also about the SCIP database. But first, a few words about my company.
Claudia, I think that we have just...
Can you hear me?
Claudia, we're losing connectivity with you at the moment, so we can't hear you very well.
Can you hear me?
Would you like to restart? Now I can hear
yes,
you.
Of course.
So let's try and start again.
Okay, good. First, I would like to thank everyone for the opportunity today to exchange our experience and our thoughts about the SCIP database. And first, I would like to tell something about my company. The A2A Group is the largest Italian multi-utility at the forefront of territorial services and technological solutions for 10 years, with 100 years of history and experience. We design smart and sustainable cities with respect for the people who live there. We are protagonists of energy transition, and we implement the principle of the circular economy in all of our activities. With a far-reaching strategic plan, we manage the generation, sale, and distribution of electricity, gas, district heating, waste collection and recovery e-mobility, public lighting, and the integrated water services. So it's a large group, 12,000 people working in this group. And next slide, please. By the 2030, we wanted to make a solid contribution to this attainment of 11 of the 17 United Nations 2030 Agenda Sustainable Development Goals. Our new strategy foresees investment totaling 16 billion in market for development of the circular economy and the energy transition. We are generating new resources in the shape of material and energy, and we are reducing wastage so as to preserve the planet's resources and protect the environment. We are developing the production and use of clean energy and speeding up the decarbonization and fostering the electrification of consumption. This is our main goals. One of the business part of our company is the waste business. Waste management part is a large sector for our company. We have different kind of plants, recovery plants, but also disposal plants like incinerator plants and landfill. So we have a large different plants in our company. So next slide, please. So what are the critical issues on recycling for us? If today we are focusing especially on recycling and on problems and critical issues about these substances of very high concern and what the SCIP database can do for us. And what the critical issues, the mainly critical issues for us are the missing information related to which chemicals are found in different waste streams, and how this can be treated in a safe and environmentally sound manner. And then the specific attention that should be given to imported goods, especially through the online sales, which represent a challenge. And especially in the last year, we saw a huge increase of this kind of products, of this kind of goods. Striking a balance between the company's investment and tackling harmful chemicals in products, and the needs of standardized methods to analyze different chemicals that are not always available. And this is also a critical issue. Next slide, please. There is currently an information deficit, especially on safety, on proper waste treatment, on quality of recovered material, and on the compliance with requirements on traceability. Next slide, please. So the reliable information on each waste stream that in order to produce risk-free recycled materials are one of the most important points that we have to consider. And then the clear, simple, and usable information regarding the presence or absence of substances of concern, and even also the other substances, because I heard before someone saying that it's a pity that we are just focusing on the substance of very high concern, and we're not considering now also the other hazardous components that can be found in waste, and the respect also of legal thresholds. Next slide, please. So a complete information flow is attainable by improving the cooperation between manufacturers and the waste management sector, supporting the use of digital solutions for improved information flows, and providing a clear and simple methodology to indicate the presence of substances of concern in waste streams. Next slide, please. What are now the current practices to handle the substance of very high concern? It depends on the stream and the type of waste, of course, because now we have different kind of waste, different kind of treatment, and every different plant has their own ways to tackle this point. Normally, we collect separately and track the hazardous components. Then we separate the hazardous component from the article, and we treat, of course, the hazardous component, or we dispose of this hazardous component in a way that is safe. The waste origin, of course, is very important, and the waste classification level. At the waste classification level, we need to check the presence of specific substances. Not always is possible to do this to do this kind of check, because sometimes it's impossible to analyze the articles. So this is a very critical issue also for us. Without the data, we have to spend a lot of time and money to conduct analysis and to search information and to try to have information of the background from the producer point of view, of course, to have some more ideas in what to do. And also it's important to have a database where the waste recyclers can see which substances are contained in a category of products. This is one of the main points that the SCIP database is going to tackle. So it's very, very important for us. Next slide, please. Today, the waste treatment and the recycling operators use both scientific and practical knowledge gained during day-to-day operations to remove waste fractions that contain hazardous or legacy substances. For instance, characterize plastic waste streams with phthalates that are based on previous analysis are separated from recyclable materials. ELV waste management, in this case, certain car models are known to contain persistent organic pollutants more likely than others and can be separated before dismantling and shredding. And this is also very important. This is more used especially for very old ELV, especially, not for the new one. Next slide, please. The risk, there are risks for workers. When we don't have enough information, the risk for workers are increasing. So these are due especially to the presence of hazardous substances in waste streams coming from articles that are not already managed by the existing procedures. The database aims to supporting the waste management industry in gathering information on the substance of very high concern, recyclable materials, as requested by the revised Waste Framework Directive. There's a need to protect workers and therefore need for better information. And this is very, very, very important. It's important also to say that the producer are not always able to give us information, very specific and detailed information about their waste. So it's our duty to try to collect more information in this case. Next slide, please. Also, the problem that is connected with the standard methods is very important, because not always is it possible to conduct analysis on articles. And when it's possible, not always we have standardized methods to use. So this is also a big, huge problem. And the treatment facilities have knowledge on substances based on prior testing, information provided by the industries, studies, etc. This testing needs and frequency depends on the waste stream and are targeted at streams to be known to contain or to likely contain substances of very high concern. It also depends on the intended application and the provisions and the requirements from the downstream user. So this is also important to keep in mind. With better information from the manufacturers, testing can be targeted more efficiently. We can lose less time if we know better what we have to search for. Next slide, please. Also very important are the information to process and recycle our waste stream. At the moment, the waste management industry needs more and better information in a usable form. Now the information that we have is limited and it costs a lot of time and money to get it. So it is worth to improve the system. And the usability of information is a key issue to be addressed. Article-based information, like project category, waste stream-based information, are very useful. The waste management industry mainly manages streams, not single articles. And so it's not easy to define a waste stream, but it's better than to try to tackle a single article that is very difficult. Data should be per article, but then the aggregation is needed to be useful. So this is our requirements. Additional information needed are also information on waste that can be utilized to decide if recycling is possible either directly or after decontamination. Also, hazardous substances can be recycled. Not every recycling needs a complete decontamination, for example, batteries or waste oil, and there will always be substances requiring care in the further in handling. Waste recycling industries need to know what to search and to look for. And we need to ensure that recyclates contain no substance of very high concern submitted to restriction or authorization, because in other case, we are going to reutilize, re-put in the market again, this kind of substances, and we need to remove it always, for always. Next slide, please. Knowing the content, recyclers can collect separately specific waste streams or try to sort out elements that contain substances of very high concern before any further process, specifically mechanical recycling. It is important to have more information about the concentration, especially regarding the substance of very high concern. And we do not know which substances will be considered of high concern in 5-10 years when those products become waste. So we have to keep in mind also that we're now tackling this article, the new article, but we have the article that are very old, that are still in commerce, and we will have new articles that are going to be put on in the market in the next few years, but probably in 10 years we will have new substances of very high concern. So we will have to try to start again with all the process. Next slide, please. It's also important to keep in mind that we have to find a way in how to use the information provided by the SCIP database when we receive the waste in bulks. Because in this case, it's very difficult also to use the information from the SCIP database. We still have to figure it out what is the best way. And we have to ask again for a guidance and a methodology on how to deal with specific waste streams containing legacy substances at the treatment phase. And this could be based on a risk assessment and applied on a case-by-case basis. And this is also very important. The waste management rules can be based on risk, but the classification of the waste has to be based on the hazard. This is a strict point. If other tools exist that cover at least the same list of substances, like this kind of tools that they use for the automotive industry, this information needs to be used, needs to be grouped in one place only. This can be, I think this can be done. And I heard before that probably ECA is already trying to figure it out how to do this new how to tackle this new target, and this can be very useful. And we need a concrete and simple information that can be easily aggregated in order to be usable for waste managers from the producers in order to know what to search or to look for. Next slide, please. And we already ask, but we will ask again for decision tree methodology for treatment phase. And for specific waste streams and closed loops, we will ask for derogation, allowing for to further recycle these secondary raw materials, provided it entails a suitable degree of traceability, and to broaden the scope of the SCIP database in the future by adding other substances of concern. Next slide, please. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Claudia. And I see that there were many points raised about the SCIP database there, Lorenzo. The ones that I wrote down were that it was, difficult to use given that the waste management industry is using waste streams in bulk and not these products and articles. And also this call to broaden the scope of the database in the future by adding more substances of concern. Lorenzo, would you like to pick up on those points made by Claudia?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Claudia, for these very good points indeed. What I like to say about the SCIP database, let's start maybe from broadening the scope of the SCIP database. I like to say that we should think of the SCIP database as a marathon rather than a sprint. It is still in its infancy. We have started receiving information only for 1 year now, and there's also going to be quite an effort in the next month to better disseminate this information. Possibly we will start with SVHCs, but expanding the database to other substances is more something that maybe my colleague from the Commission could expand on. Another thing, it's a very good point. Of course, waste operators deal with waste streams rather than single article. But nevertheless, this information could be potentially retrieved from the SCIP database, as we do have information on material categories and mixture categories. And by means of extracting information in a bulk way and in an aggregated way, or developing IT interfaces that will be able to extract this information in a meaningful and workable way for waste operator, we assume that this information could be valuable for in the future for your operation. Also, this calls on a very important point, just to conclude, that indeed the waste treatment technology is a very fast developing technology, and the role of digitalization and having this information in a digital form will surely play a more and more relevant part in making innovation rise and have new technologies and a new way of managing waste essentially.
Lewis, Lorenzo referred to you in his answer. Did you want to pick up on anything that was said there?
Yes, thanks a lot. Indeed, I mean, in the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability, the Commission has also committed to ensure or to integrate new information requirements for chemicals in products that go beyond substances of very high concern and approach what we call substances of concern. So a broader level, a broader group of substances. So it is one of the policy options that is on the table right now.
Claudia, if I go back to you, Lorenzo said that it was a marathon, not a sprint. Any comments on his answer there? It's obviously a long-term project, this database, which has only just been launched.
Yeah, I think we are still in the early moments. So probably in 1 year, we will have different tools. We will have a good experience on that, and we will be able to also, try to give more information in a useful way. Now it's just started. We are trying to use it. Of course, we can see the big potential of this. It's a huge potential, especially because we pushed a lot to have this SCIP database, and we were very much content on that. But we still need time to be fit on this marathon, to be able to run this marathon in the good way.
Understood. Claudia, I just want to pick up on a question that was in the Q&A, and it's asking you to clarify a bit more about what you mean by the decision tree that was in your last slide.
Yes, we would like to see if it's possible to define a tree methodology to be able to be sure when we have to remove the article from the bulk with which concentration. The decision tree is because we still don't know yet. We don't know yet if we found an article with a very little concentration of substance of very high concern. Do we have to recycle this article, or we can just remove the article and so not using again and not put it again in the market? So we have to find to have just one decision tree useful that everyone can use.
Thank you for that clarification. There are some questions also coming in, which I think are going to relate to our next speaker about waste electronic components and legacy substances, which I will put to Claudia and to our next speaker after he has spoken. Let me please introduce Sebastian Schormann, who's head of sales at Remondis Electro Recycling, a German company that recycles waste electrical and electronic appliances. And he's going to talk about some of the challenges of recycling waste with legacy substances. So Sebastian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, for the introduction and also the invitation. Yes, my name is Sebastian Schormann. I'm working in the recycling industry for 12 years now. And I think it's a very good topic you have today, because I think that's one of the biggest challenge at the moment. Because from practical side, there seems to be the development of different legislations which are not often hand in hand. And yeah, there's an example from the plastics which was relevant for the last years, which really shows the problem. And yeah, so the balance between circular economy and zero pollution ambitions, I think that is one of the most important things here. Please go to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So I don't want to name too many details, just to introduce the problem. So there were POP discussions, and there were the idea to set new target values for the for DKBDE in recycling plastics of 10 milligram per kilogram. So that means 10 ppm, so parts per million. And that was under discussion. And in the end, the result, in the end, the result was 500 milligram per kilogram. And yeah, that would means, or that meant that recycling of plastic from waste electronic would be still possible. And where did the idea of 10 ppm come from? Within the discussions, there was one company which is active directly in the plastic recycling. I'm working in the recycling business, where we produce, in the end, a fraction of plastics, and then we give it to specialized plastic recyclers, also sometimes within our company, but also sometimes to third parties. And yeah, the guy from a third party company, he went for 1 year. He had to travel from country to country to avoid that, or to explain what it means to implement that value. And in the end, he found it out that it was just a value which was named by a former member of the parliament. And it was just someone said, okay, that guy produced measuring equipment that was able to measure about 10 ppm for new plastics. And that was the only basis for that limit value. Please go to the next slide. So what would be the influence if that would come? On the left side, you can see a kind of average. So the share of plastics in waste electronics, it's just a mixed share of different categories. Of course, we have categories with less plastic. We have categories with more plastic, but the average is about that content. And on the right side, you can see a plus and a minus. So there's a distinguish between different kinds of the plastics. So the positive thing, that are plastics that could be recycled in a situation with a limit value of the 500 milligram. The minus are the non-recyclable plastics. So there are different reasons for non-recyclable plastics. On the one hand, the sorting technology in total is limited. You can't sort and separate everything. And in addition to that, there are also POP relevant parts in there, which are above the limit. And therefore, you have a share where you can say, okay, something could be recycled and the other section can't be recycled. Please go to the next slide. Yes. And suddenly, yeah, within the discussions, there were really values between 1,000, 10, 20, 50, 100 milligram per kilogram, so on. But what does it mean in detail? So again, we have here in the diagram, here's in focus, the minus is like from the slide before, it's a plastic we can't recycle because it was over the limit or the formal limit, or we can't separate it. And then we have on the right side where you can see the question mark and the plus and the minus. And that meant based on the limit value, it could be possible that you suddenly can't recycle anything. That would mean if the 10 ppm would be the value, suddenly the whole recycling of waste electronic plastics would be dead. Why? Because there was no standard for the measurement of that value. And in addition to that, even if you do a sorting, a state-of-the-art sorting technology, you can't separate 100% of the specific. So you will always keep small pieces of not 100% clean plastic parts. If you have one value in that clean fraction in a measuring, you need many others without any value to be in the average in the target. And the whole recycling industry was suddenly influenced by that because with that value, they could bring everything to incineration. Please go to the next slide. So what is the result of the discussion? So there was really no specific basis, and there were many different limit values under discussion, a specific one for DKBDE, but also for other brominated frame retardants, that was 50. And in the meantime, the total recycling of plastic was threatened. And because it was impossible to achieve that value, even not with latest recycling technology. And as explained, there was not even a measuring process in place. It meant in the moment that many recycling companies in that business were really afraid what will happen in the future. And yeah, they were really afraid, and they stopped investments also. And another impact is if that would be the target value, that would also mean that we don't achieve the recycling targets for WE in total, because the share of plastics in WE is increasing. And if we suddenly forbid to recycle that plastic, we even can't fulfill the recycling targets for the whole WE. Please go to the next slide. Yeah, so it would really stop recycling of waste electronic plastics. And it does not mean that we want to recycle all kind of plastics and that there's no need for limit values. We don't want to recycle hazardous parts. But there should be a discussion about the environmental impact. Because what is a real danger as long as the substances are in a chemical compound? That was also, I'm not a chemical expert, I have to say that, but there were big discussions that as long as those substances of concern are in a compound with other plastics and other materials, the environmental impact should be very low. And on the other hand, we should also have in mind what is the environmental impact to incinerate that plastics all. So that will also cause additional emissions, and we would have to produce for all those plastics new from oil. So that should be also in mind if we set a new target value. Please go to the next slide. So what do we want? We want both. On the one hand, we want a sustainable society and circular economy, but we also want a healthy environment, zero pollution. But we need to balance it, and that's, I think, the most important thing here. Please go to the next slide. And yeah, that is just a slide which is from a recent study, and you can see how weak plastic flows are ending up. And you can see that there's only 22% of all weak plastics end up in real recycling. So it's already, that's the current situation. So it's already just a small part. And if we now also would kill that, we are going far away from being a circular economy and a sustainable society. And one important aspect, it's addressed on another side already, but it's still a big issue that there are very big waste streams going to undocumented waste. And I think before we discuss more and more about stricter values, we should really focus on bringing the materials to the correct ways. And I think then the danger of having impacts in the environment would be already really lower. Please go to the next slide. Yeah. So what's for the future? There should be more interaction between both sides, so the circular economy and the zero pollution side. And only a reliable legal framework will lead to investments in more recycling technologies. And yeah, if there are changes, we need really a suitable lead time for new requirements to be able to prepare for it. But also producer need a reliable basis, otherwise there won't be any markets for the plastics. Someone else told it already before, I don't know if it was good. We need markets, and also producer need to have a safe access to markets. And if they don't know if they can use the products or the recycling plastics in a half year, they won't do it. And there should be a financial benefit for producer to use recycling materials. So there are different instruments. For example, one was already named today. It was a minimal recycling content. That could be a solution, but another solution could be also based on safe CO2 emissions, because sometimes it's from technology based different to say where we can use always minimal content. If we have a financial advantage to use recycling materials, producer would do their very best on their own to use as much recycling material as possible, because it would save money for them. And another really important aspect, zero pollution starts with eco-design. That's a real important point. And yeah, stricter limits should be always based on scientific findings, which also include impact assessment. And just one additional remark, in the presentation before, there was already a big remark or link to the SCIP database. I think one quite important aspect from the SCIP database, it's helpful if you have information. To be honest, I was not able so far to get access. I'm logged in there, but I have never saw the way how it works to use the information as recycler. I don't know how it works, but the general idea is good. But it does not help if you just get the information that there are things put together which can't be recycled. So then you just have the information. It will still use the need of better design. Please go to the next slide. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, having a look on the circle. You can see stricter target means really bigger waste streams. So that should be always in eyes if we have new target values or if there are discussions about it. It has really a big impact on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sebastian. And there are a lot of questions coming in from our audience. And one here for you, Claudia, which says, how do you intend to use the SCIP database for WE components placed on the market 15 years ago, in particular, considering the lack of homogeneous character of the waste streams?
I think we will not be able to use the SCIP database for that kind of articles. Actually, we are going to use the same kind of approach that we already used. So information on the background and other information that we can find online or with the producer, but not the SCIP database for sure.
And it also, there's a question about innovation that's come in there for you, and I wanted to broaden this to other people too. That was, yes, what's in the pipeline of innovative waste treatment technologies, according to you?
I think the chemical recycling is the goal that we have to reach. How to remove in a sustainable way the more hazardous substances from some kind of from the plastic, as an example. This is, I think, it's the new, yes, one of the new points that we have to try to focus on, for sure.
Let me also ask Claudia, and then I'll go to Sebastian and Peter to wrap up. It's a general question here for you, Claudia. Do you see new regulatory developments calling for innovation, more sophisticated treatments and waste management steps as entailing important costs for your companies? So
yes, definitely. Definitely. That's why I was saying at the beginning that we are investing, of course, not only in waste management, but in waste plant, but we are investing in the next 10 years, 16 billions in circular economy, sustainability, energy, and all these kind of topics. So for sure, it's very, very costly.
Another question that's coming in is, I mean, do you see, I mean, the European Union, you know, some would say is leading on efforts to combat climate change and, of course, the EU Green Deal.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a question about, is this an opportunity for EU waste management companies to be world leaders and export know-how and services? Or is it a risk for the whole recycling in industry? So opportunity or risk, these.
I like to see the opportunity, not the risk, actually, because the consciousness and the knowledge also from the young people all over the world about the climate change, about the environment and the future of our planet, it's more, it's increasing every day. If we have children, they are talking in schools about the environment, about the necessity of being more conscious in our life and what we do to our planet. So I think it's a huge opportunity for us.
Just to come back to somebody else's question for you, Claudia, and they're asking, do you see a risk for more legal liability for waste management with regards to substances of very high concern now that the SCIP database exists?
No.
For products?
No, because we already have this kind of liability. So we already have the necessity to check for hazardous substances in the waste and what we produce in our plants. So it's the SCIP database is just a tool that we will have helping us I hope, helping us have a work more safe and a more easy way to work. But we already have to check for POP substances, at least like and other hazardous substances. So I don't see different liability.
Sebastian, coming back to the question of cost there and these new regulatory developments calling for innovation and more sophisticated treatments and waste management steps. I mean, do you think that's going to entail important cost, you know, for your company and for the industry?
So you mean additional costs based on new legislations?
That's what the question seems to be asking, yes.
Yes. I think in general, we are continuously investing a lot of money in new recycling technologies. But the important point is always we need to be on safe side that if we now invest billions in new process, that we can run this facility for a period and deliver raw materials. So that means we need a legal framework that helps to use it also in the future. And then I think that is here where legislation should take care for. If they deliver a framework where recyclers say, okay, I invest a lot of money, and I think the Resman Group can invest money, but there need to be a kind of business model for long-term period that is also a use and a request for the services we offer there. If there's suddenly a new legislation and that makes impossible to go on processing that material any longer, people won't invest the money.
Understood. There's a question here, Lewis, for you, which was, how do we tackle the issue of endocrine disruptor compounds like BFR, brome, flame retardants in future legislation?
Yes, thanks a lot. Well, currently we are already identifying endocrine disruptors as substance of very high concern because they can be identified as substance of equivalent concern through REACH. But the chemical strategy also covers endocrine disruptors as a separate section with many actions, including the proposal of a harmonized classification at global level, and also extending the generic risk assessment, which means that when those endocrine disruptors are identified, they will not be able to be placed on consumer or professional products, except in the cases where they are essential for society, which is what I already referred to earlier.
Lorenzo, another question about the SCIP database here. How do we ensure all this data does not get lost once products enter the waste disposal stage? Otherwise, the writer says, we will have a large unused database.
Yeah, well, we will have a large repository of data about substances in article materials and mixtures, and how to make use of that. This data will be needed to be used in an aggregated way, for instance. But it really depends on the actor that is going to consult the database. A consumer may have different needs than a waste operator, and by now, as I said, we are working on a dissemination platform, and we will make sure to disseminate this information in a way that is accessible and workable. And I also wanted to touch upon another element that has been discussed, this product passport. And I also wanted to highlight how the data contained in the SCIP database could potentially fill the section in the product passports that has to do with the chemical hazard of product. So in any way, the information contained in the database will not be lost, but it will, as this is a very tangible example, can be retrieved and used. The SCIP is going to be a very specific repository of data for chemical hazards. I would define it like this.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Peter, there's a question here about the ability of the waste management sector to adapt. You've got two ambitions, the circular economy, more recycling, and you've got zero pollution. Having heard many different ideas from people from the Commission, from the Chemical Agency, the Parliament, and the in industry, what do you think the industry is going to be able to do realistically, Peter, to meet the zero pollution ambition and to meet the circular economy ambition? I'm hoping that Peter is still with us, or perhaps he has had to go and do something more urgent. But how could there be anything more urgent? What I am pleased to say is that if Peter is not with us, I will then hand over and perhaps ask that question to Valérie Pleine-Maison, who's the Secretary General of FEAD. You've got these two ambitions, Valérie. How are you going to combine them? And I would also like to invite you to make your closing remarks.
Yes, thank you very much, Claire. I think we lost Peter. I'm sure he had a problem of connection because he is very interested in the topic. To answer your question, to make this long story short, yes, we are ready to innovate. We are ready to adapt. We are ready to invest, provided we have visibility for recycling. And that's the story of mandatory recycled contents, for example. But by doing so, we should not be placed in an impossible situation. That was everything that was said by Claudia or by Sebastian, with thresholds that might be impossible to verify, to monitor. So we monitor more and more, but the detectability threshold, so it's really a tricky and technically difficult thing. We should not be placed in a difficult situation where we legally cannot recycle. That's what Sebastian showed very well in a slide, where unknown treatments happen to vast waste flows, not the ones we treat, but if I was ready to make a quite short wrap up, that would be that priority action is phasing out hazardous substances of very high concern. It's easy to say, it's a very ambitious task, and it's not ours. So now what is our task will be to deal in between and in the future with legacy substances. That's the second priority action or problem. So we mentioned several times here the word innovation. That's very positive. More information, digitalization, more separate collection, more sorting out, more traceability, that goes together with innovation. And for that, there's a need not only for support, public support to new innovation, but also to best existing techniques so that they spread out all over Europe. Because support to innovation for European Union cannot be given to competitive projects. It has to be given to projects that will benefit to everybody. So here we are private companies, and we need to be able to invest in systems that remain competitive, also although they are more expensive. And this is why there is a need for public support, for more more performant collection, separate collection systems, sorting out systems, and so on. So innovation is key, but will not make it happen all.
Thank you, Valerie. And
I'm going
thank
to
you.
stop the video because I have the impression the connection is poor.
No, you were very, very clear. Your last words were, "We can't do everything."
Okay.
If you'd like to carry on, I think we can all
Okay.
hear you.
Okay, perfect. So then the second key word is regulation, is appropriate regulation. We have lots of regulations, and that was explained by Luis Carretero on products, but we need appropriate that can be applicable to waste management, because the waste is not a product. So we abundantly discussed about that, and those rules for waste management should rely on a risk-based approach, should be based on a solid scientific analysis, not only on intrinsic but on the risk they result with on products or waste management, so that we have adequately based risk management rules at EU level. That's the decision tree that Claudia mentioned. This has to go into that direction. A third,
now
cooperation between industry and waste management. We should work a bit better hand in hand. And
Valerie, I think you were right. You are now beginning to.
I don't hear you, Claire. I'm going to stop the video, maybe.
Yes, if you stop the video, because you were breaking up in that last sentence.
And the
outbreaking, working hand in hand.
The very last word
was
yes, and the very last word is the EU legislator is my very last word would be that when the EU legislator has ambition, this is what they had for 20 years, the last 20 years, and that gives lots of results, that changes our day-to-day work, and that changes the life of the citizens, and that makes Europe better, probably. They always should think in terms of enforcement, because we see we are always behind the deadlines and behind the objectives, because enforcement is not enough taken into consideration. So we are happy to try and combine both ambitions, but we need enforceable rules and enforced rules, if I may say, to try and combine both approaches. We people from the circular economy. So this is my wrap up, and I give you the final word. Claire, maybe we can try and get back in connection with Peter if he is back online. I don't see.
If Peter is back online, now is your moment, Peter.
Outline.
I can't see him also.
There must have been an issue.
Right. So in that case, it leaves me to have the last word to thank you, Valerie. Thank you to all of our speakers from the industry, from the European Chemicals Agency, the Parliament and the Commission, also to the audience for their very informed questions. And I love the chat that has been going on in the Q&A box between the experts and our audience. Just to let you know that after the summer break, FEAD will be holding a webinar on another burning issue, that of waste shipments and waste exports. But for now, that's all from me. Goodbye and thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.